As a business owner, do you have something you're really good at? You want to spend more time doing that, but you're stuck in the muck doing all the other things you didn't sign up for being a business owner, like having to hire people, maybe having to sell your product, maybe having to manage the production of it. Well, today we're going to talk about how to figure out what you're good at and how to optimize that. Sometimes as a small business owner, you might not be the best at running your company. Maybe it might be time to hire someone to run your company and you take a job within that company if that's what it's going to take you to get to the next level. Welcome to the KeyHire Small Business Podcast. My name is Corey Harlock. I'm the creator of KeyHire and I will be your host today. We are season 2, episode 8. We're coming to you from the shores of Lake Champlain in upstate New York. Out of my normal office, we're up at a place we have here on the lake, and we're in the most northeast corner of New York you can be in. Most of you might know this by now, but I'm a Canadian, so we're like 20 minutes from the Canadian border, so we can get up there and see the in-laws, and it makes it easy for them to get down and see us. But today, we're going to talk about, we have Sean Flaherty with us today. He's going to talk to us about how to maximize our strengths. Sean's a father of 4, and he used to jump out of airplanes when he was with the U.S. Navy. Thanks for your service, Sean. He has an award-winning class called Leading a Culture Innovation, and he teaches that to MBAs. He's also the managing partner of a 300-person company that builds software products, which is very cool. And he's a recognized Vistage speaker. So we can expect clarity and concise, no filler words like I use. But anyway, Matt, let's bring Sean on and get into this.
Hey, Corey.
Hey, Sean, how you doing?
I'm doing well, sir.
Did I nail the intro?
It was great. Thank you for that.
Very cool. So today, obviously you've been through this exercise, but give us how we're going to talk about how to maximize your strengths and kind of get rid of the junk and focus on what you do, right? Is that kind of where we're going with all this?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, there's a predominant theory in the social sciences and academia called the self-determination theory. And the self-determination theory talks about what is it that gets us up in the morning with a spring in our step. It applies to all humans in all aspects of life, right? So, and from a leadership perspective, you're leading a company, I think it's a responsibility to understand the core concepts of intrinsic motivation. Like, what is it that really, right. What does science say about it? And science has some pretty crystal clear things. There's 3 sort of components to the theory. One is autonomy, like that sense of control in our lives, like knowing that we have a steering wheel and that, like, we're in control of it. If we feel like someone else is in control of that, that diminishes our intrinsic motivation. If we feel like we're doing things that we have to do because other people want us to, or because of some external systems, it's going to diminish our intrinsic motivation. Another one is relatedness, like understanding that the work we're doing, the things that we're doing, actually have meaning to others. It's called relatedness. Like, I feel cared for and I have someone to care for, and the work that I'm doing actually matters for others. And then third, kind of the core subject of this podcast is around competence. It's around what are you good at and how do you contribute to the world? Like, how can your unique skills make the world a better place? Again, in the context of others, but it's that competence component that the scientists talk about as being really important. So, I think to answer your question, if you don't have a good handle on that, like, what is it that you are good at and how are you adding value to the world? You're going to already be starting from a point that's going to be hard to be motivated.
That's interesting. So our audience is predominantly small business owners, let's say 5 to 25 million, 5 to, I don't know, $50 million in revenue. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes they find themselves, I don't know what your experience has been, but they find themselves kind of, well, it's part of the progression. When you start a company, you hire your neighbor, you hire your relatives, you hire your relatives' friends, and everyone kind of takes on a role and does the best they can, but everyone's kind of helping everyone everywhere, right? That's how you start a company for the most part, unless you're like what you're dealing in, a tech company, and you're going for rounds and rounds of financing. And then as you grow and you kind of get to that curious growth stage, as we call it at KeyHire. You kind of go from being that paralyzed owner who's trying to do everything, then you move into the unsure, then you move into a curious, and then you move into a growth mindset. Things need to change, and the business and the org chart, accountability chart changes. And so I'm wondering if in your world that would translate to you're always trying to chisel out and hire people to do things you don't best or aren't the most productive or enjoyable for you, so you can focus on what that is, that thing. Does that make sense? Is that, am I missing something, or is that kind of part of?
No, it's spot on. I mean, in my business, ITX is, here's my coffee cup. But my business, we started it. I have partners. There's four of us, and it's been a slog. And we started in the beginning of the internet's, trying to grow. We never took outside funding, other than some per debt.
Most people don't. No, most small business owners don't.
Yeah, so I've been through exactly what you're talking about, actually multiple times, because I have other businesses that I've built over the years. But when you're small, you wear lots of hats. So I have a software development agency today. And in the beginning, I was the programmer, the designer, the code, the support person, technician. I would install it, I would support it, I'd put it on the server. I did it all. And over time, you have to, if you're going to grow a business, you have to, let's say, delegate. You have to grow other people to be able to take on those competencies. And, one place where this has been acute is in the business of the internet. 25 years ago, it was a brand new thing, and none of these skills existed. So we had to actually grow them and learn them along the way, and then grow other people into them and figure out how to lead other people, and it's a creative bunch too. Let me tell you. So this is a crew. If you think about it, these are artists, engineers, software architects. These are really smart, highly paid, highly educated people, and their competence matters profusely to, it's very important to them. They would take us, most of the folks that work for me, I'm speculating here, but I believe that most of the folks that work in my company would take another job for less money if it meant they would learn more and grow more and be able to contribute more. That's pretty much a standard in my industry. So I get where you're coming from, and I do believe, like I said, as a leader, it behooves you to understand this competence piece of intrinsic motivation and knowing what you are good at and what motivates you, and then also knowing what the people that work for you are good at, want to be good at, want to grow into, and getting a handle on that is a really important, I think, leadership task.
Are there any kind of indicators or signs or reflections a business owner can do to kind of narrow down? Because there are things we have to do every day. And there's also the things we love to do every day. And sometimes, if you can take yourself back to when you were startup and getting busy, and it's always that business doesn't grow like this, right? You got sales, then you got to scale up, and then, we have too many people, too many programmers, we've got to go get more business, and it's always this ebb and flow. When you were in that situation, how did you, or is there a process you can go through to kind of identify this is where I need to be the most effective in this company?
Yeah, so I think that this is one of the key skills of great leadership is like being able to kind of matrix out and identify what are the core skills that we need to have in order to grow this business, and which of those skills can be delegated, and how soon am I going to need to delegate them, and creating a matrix, so to speak, of here are the different parts of the business that we need to grow into in order for us to scale. So matrix can be a very scary word for the small business owner who's in this kind of, as we call, paralyzed state, right? They're thinking matrix jumping. I don't even know how I'm going to keep the door, get product shipped tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah, but I think it's something that you have to do. This is what we would call strategic planning, right? Even though I think those two terms are oxymorons. Like, you got to have a strategy, and part of your strategy, I believe, one of the most important parts of your strategy is knowing, if you know where you want to go, like, here's the people that we serve as a company in the world, and here's the problems that we solve. If you have that clearly laid out, then you can pretty clearly articulate, here's the skills of the future that we're going to need to grow into.
Right.
And here's the things I'm doing today that I can't possibly do if we're going to scale. Like, I can't be doing this tomorrow if we're going to be, if we're going to go from 30 million to 50 million, like, these are things I'm going to have to outsource. And if you don't take the time, that's part of, I believe that's a key part of strategy, is taking the time to articulate, here's our capabilities that make us unique and powerful in the world, that allow us to solve these problems for these people and ultimately turn them into advocates.
Right.
If we have that articulated, now we can look objectively at that matrix of competencies and come up with a way of looking at our organizational competence that shows us where our gaps are and where our gaps are going to be. And I like to do that as objectively as possible.
Right.
Does it make sense? And when I say
it does make sense, and that it's part of the progression. And I think a lot of the business owners I get to work with often are, we take them back, like, the beginning is that paralyzed state when it's just so busy, they're trying to do everything, and they're oftentimes their team are great people doing the best job they can, but the business and the volume of business and the complexity of the business have outgrown their experience or capabilities. And that is the biggest constraint on a business, right? And I think we're talking the same language, where that's where a business owner has to say, have a problem here. We're just not executing. And oftentimes when they're new and it's these loyal people that have been with them a long time and that have given blood, sweat, and tears, it's hard to say, that's my problem, right? Because they kind of get blinded, or they truthfully are just so busy, they just know it's not working the way it needs to. When time is your only input, that's probably not a great process. When all you can do is put more time on it and have more people work more hours to get the job done, that gets really tough.
Yeah, let's be honest about that. Every business, my own included, at some point they're going to reach this what's called the valley of death, right? Where you have to make some investments. You have to make some investments which are going to eat into your profitability and maybe even make you go negative for a little while. And you're going to have to be able to sustain that to get out the other side.
So define investments, because that's an interesting term. And my initial thought is, like, it's, I think, people. You got to start bringing in some really high experience, high impact talent, right? But give me some other depth when you say, what's that?
Every business is different, but it's almost always about talent. Like,
okay,
in my experience,
the right business.
Yeah, sometimes it's if you're manufacturing something, sometimes it's always a competence issue, though, right? So, like, hey, we figured out this niche, and we can make a bunch of money. We see that there's this problem that we're solving in the market. We can turn these customers into advocates. So maybe we need to buy $1 million piece of equipment so we can produce more of it and get over that hump. Or maybe it's, if you have a commerce business of some sort, maybe you need to make an investment in going into some e-commerce channels so you can raise the volume, so you can lower your cost basis but there's always some investment. And I would argue, to your point, it's almost always talent. It's almost always like
it turns around, right? If you're going to buy that big piece of equipment, well, you need to have someone who can do the planning and the operation and the training and the scheduling and all that good stuff.
Yeah, it's almost always talent, unless you're going to work yourself to death. You have to hire folks, ideally, that are better at the thing than you are.
Well, that's what you think you want.
That's what you want. Like, that's what you always want. Whether you think you do or not, that is what you want to have occur.
And I don't know if you've ever been a part of it, but it's really cool. It happens with KeyHire when we get in there, because a lot of what we do is this talent planning for them. Like, here's where you are, here's where you want to be. So here are the steps we need to take in terms of your personnel, right? Your org chart's going to change and shift. It's not like we make one hire and life is better. That's never the case, but it's going to change, and we're going to baby step our way through this. But once you redefine what a great person looks like in their company. It's amazing to watch business owners when they go, oh, I didn't know these people existed out there, because they just haven't broken through to that market or committed to the investment of paying someone what it takes to bring them in, because often it's a big ticket item.
Yeah. Labor is always that's our biggest line item in most businesses these days, certainly in the software development agency.
For sure. I know, it's crazy. Those guys are, and they don't even want to come to the office. They want to work from the back of their van at the beach while you're paying them all that.
Which is fine as long as they're productive, right? They're killing it.
So let's kind of talk then about the mistakes you see, business owners making when, they're trying to focus on their talent, where they can bring the biggest impact to their business. I think we've danced around it a lot, but what mistakes do you see business owners make when they kind of say, hey, I'm going to focus, I'm going to lead the sales team because that's what I'm good at. I know all the clients, I built up this business, and I need everyone else to do their job so I can focus on sales. That might not be the right example, but what mistakes do you see them making when they try to kind of pull themselves out of all the muck and focus on those one or two things that they think they want to do, or it's their passion, or they think is the biggest impact for their business?
Yeah. And again, I think it goes back to what I said earlier. I think it was Steve Jobs that says you hire smart people so they can tell you what to do, not so you can tell them what to do. Right.
Right.
I think it all goes back to self-determination theory for me. Like, you hire a person for what you can see. Like, you can only see what they put on their resume, the stories that they can tell about their history, and whatever you get from calling references or whatever. They've got a collective history of what they've accomplished. But you don't hire, like, Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Effective Leaders, got a great quote in the beginning of his book. It says, you can hire a person's hands, but you can't hire their heart. You can hire a person's back, but you can't hire their mind. And I think the bigger a company gets, the more important it is to be hiring on values first. So you hire on values first, competence second. And you need to have that competence. Like, you can't hire people that don't know how to do the job. But if you don't pay attention to that, to the values, which I think a lot of small business people are so desperate to get the talent, to get the work off their plate, that they forget, or they don't know. Maybe it's ignorance. Maybe it's just to be more expeditious and whatever you want to call it. But if you take your eye off that values ball, that's going to cost you way more in the long run than making a bad values hire is going to cost you more than making a bad competence hire. Because a competence hire, you're going to see it pretty quickly if they're not competent, and you're going to make a decision whether they're trainable or not, and you get them off the plate. But the values piece, if they're competent, it can be a really long-term cancer that you brought into the company. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Simon Sinek calls those people high-performing assholes.
Fair enough.
Right? If you ever want to know who the asshole is in your business, just ask your employees. They'll all point to the same person, right? Those are the people that just don't fit in with the culture. Our philosophy is, if we're going to put someone on your bus, they got to be at the front. So all your other employees go, wow, they're a really good employee. I got to raise my game. I got to be better, do better. So yeah, that culture piece is, because once you get distractions in there, or toxic, it gets toxic or cancerous, whatever, insert word here. Oftentimes your high performers don't want to play that game, and then they leave, and then that gets really expensive, because as your best people start leaving, this new person who was supposed to really come in and ground the company and raise you up, you're losing your good people. And now this person who is really the problem becomes even more important in your business, because they're kind of the last one left. And if they leave, there's no one to kind of do the job, or the people that are left don't have that level of competence. What about when you hear people say, well, a business owner say, well, I'll just do that. Like, I don't like it, but no one else wants to do it, so I'll just do that. And then they dive into a part of the business that doesn't energize them, or doesn't make them jump out of bed and ready to go to work, because they're slogging through stuff that they've determined no one else can do it, so I'll just do it even though it's not what I want to do.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way of getting around some of that.
Right.
If that becomes the focus of your time, then you can't be doing the things that are important to really growing a business. So, I don't know a lot of successful business owners that didn't, put the dishes in the dishwasher and clean the floors every now and then and like do the work that has to get done. It's at least the good ones. Like they're willing to get down and do the work at all the levels when they need to.
Right.
And having that sort of a leadership ethic, I think, is a good thing to demonstrate, and it's a good thing to have. But at the same time, your job as you get bigger is to coach and to teach and to lead and to connect. Like that becomes your job. Right. And if you find that you're not doing those things, if you're not spending more of your time connecting people to the vision, connecting and figuring out what building blocks are going to better connect people and what building blocks are going to grow you for the future so that you're more adaptable in the future. And if you're doing less of those things over time, you're making a mistake. That's my theory.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something that's key in because you said as you're growing. So in the beginning, I think it is important that you load the dishwasher, clean the floors, lock the door on the way out. But as you grow, and this is kind of that growth mindset of a business owner, understanding that you can't do that and grow the company and get to, however big you want, $100 million a year and still be doing that. That's where, I think that's how you have to start a business, right? But as you kind of grow through those growth stages and start hitting those objectives, you have to let go, trust other people to do that type of stuff so you can focus on the bigger picture. Absolutely.
But at the same time, David Packard wrote a book, the guy from Hewlett-Packard wrote a book, The HP Way, which I read years ago, and there's one line in that book that just resonated, rung with me. He called it management by walking around.
Yeah.
And I watched people like some of my heroes, like Ed Bastian's the CEO of Delta, who really took Delta, think about it, through a couple of really tumultuous periods in the history of the airline industry. I think there's still a tremendous amount of value as a leader to getting in there, participating in some of the lower level meetings every now and then, just to keep your ear to the ground and to stay connected to customers, and maybe going on a sales call every here and again, just to, stay plugged into the different parts of the business as you grow. I think that's valuable.
Sure.
And I think when you model that sort of behavior as the leader, your leaders below you will model the same behavior, because human beings are mimicry machines.
Yeah.
And I don't think you want to lose all of that. But the point I'm trying to make here is to be purposeful about it.
Right.
And if you're doing the work because someone else can't, that's not being purposeful about it. That's you doing the work by default, to your point.
Yeah. Now there's I forget the name of the guy, but he wrote the book, I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell. He apparently not a great guy, but he started a company where they would use interviews and professional writers to write your book. So you would kind of go there. It was called Book in a Box was the name of the company. So they would interview you and get hours of tape of you, and then they would write a book in your voice with your information and publish it and get it out there for you, like a lot of CEO and busy people would do it, right? Because they would just have to get on the phone for a couple hours and spill their guts, and then they would kind of do this. But he found it was a great interview where I forget what podcast he was on, but he said it came to the point where I knew I was the wrong person to grow the company. So I actually hired a CEO, and I took a job, like not even in like the C-level management. He took a job kind of as a director or heading up a department of that company and let someone else run it. And boom, they broke through. So he kind of recognized his limitations, but also I don't want to run the company. I really enjoyed this little aspect of it. Let me go play over here and hire someone and trust them to do that. Have you ever kind of run into that or seen a situation like that where you're talking to someone and you're thinking you might be better served to go out and get someone to run the company for you and just kind of be a part of that?
I think if you started it and it's your baby, that's a very mature decision to make, and probably a very hard hard decision to make. But in some cases, it's a good one. I'm one of these people that really never had a desire to be a CEO or run a company myself.
Right.
So like, I just don't want, there's a lot that goes along with being in that position that I think I figured out pretty early on. I don't want all of that. You know what I mean? Like, I have my place. And I think that's a very hard thing to do. I've seen, I haven't seen it in a lot of cases where a leader's done that. I've seen them move on to go start something else. I've seen that happen a lot, but I haven't seen a lot of examples where the CEO became a director of something and stayed in the company. I'm sure it happens probably more frequently than I think or that I know, but I haven't seen it a lot. It's got to be a very hard decision to let go.
Yeah, it could also be a very liberating decision too if you put the right person in place.
I can imagine for myself, it would be a very liberating experience. Yeah,
but it's also, I mean, you got to check your ego there, because you watch this person make your company a success, get up to points where you might not ever have gotten it.
True. Yeah, and there's a lot of great stories out in the Silicon Valley ethos around highly successful organizations that have done that. Yeah, the CEO stepped down for a period of time and came back, or handed it off and came back.
Yeah, it's interesting, but I guess that fits into that. Like, this running this thing doesn't make me jump out of bed in the morning. But
it's a very different thing, running a business and starting a business. They're very different. Take totally different skills, as you know.
Yeah, it is. And I guess if you don't grow into it or have that mindset, I mean, some people just aren't great leaders. They have great ideas, and they're great at innovation, or they're great at creating, or they're great at engineering, whatever it is. And I've always been a proponent of, just because you start a business, obviously I work on the talent side. So I say, people didn't start a business because they love to hire people. And just because you've hired a bunch of people over the time of your business doesn't mean you're great at it, right? Like, I've hit tens of thousands of golf balls, but I probably haven't hit one right. It doesn't mean I can go out and teach people how to hit golf balls, right? But I've hit a lot. And just because we go out and do things because we're the owner of the company and we have to try all these things, doesn't mean we're good at them. And recognizing when you have to say, look at this, maybe I could be better here, or I don't like doing it, or this isn't my bag, I need to go find someone to do it, it's scary, because you have to get it right. You have to get that right person in there, but also it can be pretty empowering, and it's the best thing for your company.
Yeah, I can speak from experience on that one. In the beginning of ITX and my software development agency, I had my hand in most of the hires, and I made some pretty bad hires. Like, one of the things I'm not good at is hiring people. And I figured out early on, the reason is because I love everybody. I'm like one of those people. I connect with people. I love everybody, and I look at the resume. I'm like, oh, it looks good, so they must be a good hire. Yeah. And it's a terrible way to hire, terrible. And it took me a long time to figure that out. So now I have veto power, but I don't have much to do with the hiring anymore.
Yeah, and I'm sure that veto power comes when you get like a spidey sense about someone, and you're
that's very much
off than on, right? If you're turned on, you're like, yeah, run them through your process, let me know. But if there's something comes up, you're like, whoa, let's dig in over here. There's a couple things we need to look at.
Yeah, exactly.
So Sean, the kind of final step of the conversation is, what advice, or what do you think are the top 1, 2, 3 crucial kind of steps or processes or books or things, other than calling you to say, hey, Sean, help me sort this out? What can a business owner do to kind of start identifying where they want to be, creating that strategic plan, acting on it? But I think more so just kind of understanding what it is they want to be doing in their business that's best for them, and therefore best for the business. Yeah,
so I would start by reading a book by a guy named Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. It's titled Flow. And what Mihaly studied his whole life, he passed away, I think, 2 years ago, But what he studied his whole life was human peak performance. And he studied musicians and athletes and business people and all dimensions of life. And he found, that people are, and he basically studied that competence component of self-determination theory. And what he found was that people in their prime, when they perform their best, when there's a significant amount of challenge against a significant amount of skills that they have, that they uniquely bring to the table. And you are in a state of flow when you're challenged enough that you're learning and growing, and you actually get excited to stay on that growth path. And I think if you read that book and you understand the science of flow and human peak performance, I bet most leaders would find in their work the points at which they find their own flow. Like they find the pieces of the business that they really love to do. And for the pieces that are kind of outside of that, maybe those are the things that you should be thinking about outsourcing.
What would be a realistic percentage that you get to work in those areas that you can get into a flow and cause you that level of excitement? Are we looking for 100% here? Are you looking 80-20, 60-40? What's the mix?
Great question. And even Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi studies this as well. And there is a balance, and it's going to be a different place for everybody. And for you to know yourself, like you have to have cycles of rest and flow, like deep rest, which is why you can't play basketball if you're Shaquille O'Neal or LeBron James. You can't play 8 hours. You can't play 25 hours a day and not this doesn't work. You got to find those cycles, and it's going to be different for everybody. So I think a good rule of thumb is, I would say, if you could find a way in which you're in flow 2 hours a day, 2-3 hours a day in your workday, that's a good place to be. That'd be my rule of thumb. And
even when you say that, I'm like, man, that for people to find those 2 or 3 hours just to really get into what they do uninterrupted, right? Because how many times you get the, do you know where do I find this document, or where's the contract for, or where is this, right? So getting it set up to do it is very cool. Hey,
yeah, man, but if you don't set up the time for it, if you don't have that purpose, you're never going to get it. You're never going to have that space in your life. You're just going to keep solving the fire that's in front of you, And
so I've talked about this on previous podcasts. Sometimes we get addicted to that because that's where you feel your value is. And
dangerous.
I have my personal theory is addicted to chaos. And I always reference, I had a client who they had a CNC business and they machine stuff. And their claim to fame was, you call us at 6 o'clock Friday, whatever you need, and we'll have it there by, before the weekend's done. And so I said to them, well, why don't you look at all these calls you've received? I bet you 80% of them are involved with 10 materials. Put them in the back. You got this big old warehouse, put them back there and just use them on consignment, right? Inventory them every week and pay for what you use. And what came back was, but if we do that, we can't charge as much because we have it and it's not as hard. I said, but your client doesn't know that. If they need it, they're willing to pay whatever. And if you're the person who can get it for them, but they weren't in love with the product they were selling. They were in love with how hard they had to work to produce the product they were selling. And they saw the value of their product was in how hard it was to deliver, because no one else could do it, but they could. And they could have made it a lot easier, but they refused to do that.
Fascinating.
Isn't that wild?
That's wild.
So sometimes we get in love with the quick hits. I can fix a fire. I can solve a problem right now. And that gives me that little boost of adrenaline, and I'm like, okay, one problem solved. Scheduling 2 hours to be uninterrupted and not do that. But that's growth, right? That's that growth mindset from kind of a startup small business through to a growing and mature business. You got to understand the value of that.
For sure.
Well, hey, this has been great. I've really enjoyed you taking the time out this Thanksgiving weekend or Thanksgiving week coming up with us. I appreciate that. Sean, I know, people could reach out to you. We talked to you. Thank you for your service. You're a former Navy. you're a Vistage speaker and you run a program as well. So tell anyone out there listening, if they want to learn more about you or reach out and get in touch with you, tell us how we can get in touch with you.
For sure. Well, if you need any software, obviously you got a person to call. That's what we do for a living, day in and day out. We solve challenging technology problems with software teams. But I also speak. I'm on the road, like you said, Corey, for Vistage. So if you're a Vistage member or interested in that, Vistage.com. And then I am also speaking on a tour with an organization called Industry Conferences. It's really for software product leaders, but I run workshops for them. So you're always welcome to attend one of those and come see me there.
Yeah, and I neglected to mention that we met through Vistage Network, and always happy to support Vistage members. My chair, Chuck Hendy, we did a really cool interview a while ago about how actually Vistage created KeyHire. I didn't have KeyHire when I joined my first Vistage group.
Wow.
And the people in that group, I had an idea, and just all the different people in that TA group with me walked me. They're like, how are you going to make money on this? I'm like, I have no idea. So they walked me. It was a B2B CFO, Michael Bowie, walked me through the pricing structure. We had Rainey Busby, who is an EOS implementer, was like, well, how are you going to provide service? I have no idea. So she walked me through the EOS model. And so it's you and I sitting here doing this podcast is really the product of me being in a Vistage group 8 years ago.
It's a great resource for growing a business, for sure.
I can't recommend it enough, especially for the people we're talking about today. And a lot of the things that you shone a light on today, they would get that kind of, I wanted to say expert help, but it's not expert help. It's more people that have been through it and have gone through the experience, and much like you did for us today, can kind of tell you the rights and wrongs, and well, here are the mistakes I made. I don't know how to do it correctly, but I know how not to do it, right? So yeah, I agree. It's a super valuable resource. Thanks so much. Have a great Thanksgiving. All my best to you and the family, and we'll be in touch soon.
Same to you, Corey. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sean. There you go, Sean Flaherty. Some great information, man. I'm loving these conversations more and more. Selfishly, I'm learning a lot too. I mean, I'm a small business owner. We're all small business owners. And it's always amazing when you can get this context from other people who have been there, done that, are expert resources, have lived it, whatever it is. Anything we can do to give you a peek behind the curtain and give you some real life, big resources that you might not be available to you, we're happy to do that. That wraps up season 2, episode 8. If you like what you heard, please follow us, like it, share it, subscribe, do whatever you have to do. You can check out our podcast on any of the main providers, KeyHire Small Business Podcast. If you like watching your content, you can check us out on YouTube. We're desperate for subscribers. Give us some subscribes there. You can always jump on our LinkedIn page. We have always keep our content up to date. You can see previous shows, videos, audio, anything we're posting there. Or if you want to talk to me or learn about KeyHire, you can jump on the website at keyhire.solutions. The .solutions is the .com. So it's keyhire.solutions. We have a free consultation up there. No sales, no weirdness. We're just there to help small business owners. So if you want to talk about talent strategy, we're happy to do that with you. I hope everyone has a safe, happy, healthy Thanksgiving weekend coming up here. And till next time, stop grinding and start growing.